What if the cheapest meals in history were also the smartest? For centuries, native tribes survived famine and drought with recipes made from bark, acorns, and wild roots, food scientists now call perfect nutrition. Today, I'll show you 15 cheap native recipes that fed whole nations through hunger, war, and change, and why they might save us again.
Beautiful looking salad. So this is our corn succotash with edamame.
Number 15, Acorn Bread. Picture this. You're deep in a California forest 400 years ago. The air smells of oak leaves and smoke. Families sit around flat stones, pounding acorns for hours. To the outside world, it looked like endless labor. To them, it was survival and the taste of home. Acorns weren't just food, they were strategy. When the game disappeared and rivers froze, acorns kept villages alive. Every fall, families gathered hundreds of pounds. Children climbed trees to knock them loose, while elders sorted them by color and size. But eating them raw would make you sick. The trick lay in patience. Tribes like the Miwok, Pomo, and Chumash soaked the acorn meal in cold water again and again until the bitterness vanished. Sometimes it took 2 days. Then they shaped the dough, spread it on hot stones, and baked it over slow coals. The result? Bread that tasted like roasted nuts, dense but comforting, the forest's version of sourdough. Early settlers saw it and laughed. They called it starvation food. But when crops failed in the 1800s, settlers turned to the same recipe, desperate to survive. Ironically, modern nutritionists now call acorn flour a superfood for its fiber, minerals, and healthy fats. Every loaf carried a lesson that the cheapest, simplest foods can be the smartest. And speaking of smart, the next recipe took 3 humble crops, corn, beans, and squash, and built an entire survival system around them. But who first discovered that mix could feed 2 civilizations at once? Number 14. Corn and bean succotash. 3 colors in one bowl, gold, green, and white. The dish looked simple, but it carried centuries of strategy and survival. The Wampanoag people served it to starving pilgrims in 1621. That moment of mercy became the seed of America's first comfort food. Succotash wasn't a fancy meal. It was a genius born of scarcity. Corn brought energy, beans gave protein, and squash held water and sweetness. Together they covered every need the human body had. Early colonists copied it, though they rarely gave credit. Records from 1643 mention a stew of Indian corn and beans most filling and warm. Through wars, droughts, and the Great Depression, succotash kept showing up. By 1931, it appeared in government recipe books for poor families. Cheap, filling, endlessly adaptable, that's what made it timeless. But its roots ran far deeper than any cookbook. To tribes, it symbolized cooperation, 3 crops working together the way people should. Survival through unity. That's what succotash taught. And unity mattered even more for the next food, a single ingredient that became a meal, a medicine, and a weapon in war. But what happened when settlers learned to drink it instead of eat it? Number 13. Corn mush. If there was one food that built early America, it was mush. Ground corn boiled with water until thick like porridge. Poor man's breakfast, soldier's ration, or baby's first meal. Everyone ate it, from Iroquois farmers to George Washington soldiers. Native families called it samp or hasty pudding. It kept for days, tasted good with anything, and cost nothing. In 1776, Continental soldiers were given cornmeal instead of bread rations because it could survive weeks in transport. Diaries from Valley Forge mention mush as the only thing that stood between them and starvation. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. 1 cup fed a man through a workday. Add dried berries, maple sugar, or smoked fish, and it became a feast. Colonists eventually commercialized it, calling it grits or polenta, but its origin stayed native. By 1830, cornmeal mush had become breakfast for millions across the frontier. Its simplicity made it unstoppable. Yet, while settlers claimed it as theirs, native communities never stopped adapting it. Some mixed it with wild rice or groundnuts for extra strength. That same search for strength led to another forgotten staple, a sweet root that fueled whole journeys. But why did it disappear from American tables when it could have replaced sugar itself? Number 12. Sweet root stew. Before cane sugar conquered the world, sweetness came from the ground. Tribes across the Rockies dug up sweet root, a wild plant that tasted like honey when boiled. Explorers in the 1800s wrote that a handful can flavor a whole pot. The Shoshone and Ute treated it as food and medicine. During long hunts, a single root could keep hunger away for hours. The Lewis and Clark journals from 1805 mentioned trading tobacco for it, calling it the sugar of the plains. But as settlers moved west, they began over-harvesting. By 1890, wild patches were vanishing, replaced by imported cane fields and corn syrup. Sweet root went from daily food to near myth in one generation. Scientists later confirmed it contained rare natural fructans, sugars that energized slowly, without crashes. In today's world obsessed with fake sweeteners, that ancient plant feels like the answer we missed. And speaking of answers we missed, the next dish used fire, patience, and smoke to preserve food for years. But one government decision nearly ended the people who perfected it. What food could carry rebellion and survival in the same bite? Number 11. Smoked salmon jerky. Long before refrigeration, tribes of the Pacific Northwest mastered something extraordinary: how to make fish last a year without spoiling. They smoked salmon over alderwood fires until it turned deep red and leathery. The smell alone told you winter was coming. This wasn't just cooking, it was strategy. Salmon runs came once a year, and tribes like the Tlingit, Haida, and Chinook turned those few weeks into a survival season. Families built smokehouses near rivers, stacking fillets in layers. The process took days, sometimes weeks. By the end, the salmon was rich, smoky, and nearly immortal. In 1778, Captain Cook wrote that it tasted of the land itself, salt, smoke, and sun. It became currency, traded across thousands of miles. Each strip carried both protein and pride. But when canneries appeared in the 1880s, the traditional smokehouses began disappearing. Machines replaced hands, and profit replaced patience. Today, wild salmon jerky costs $40 a pound, the same food once shared freely in coastal villages. And speaking of costly traditions, there's another native food that once fueled trade routes longer than the Silk Road. But the controversy lies in how outsiders used it for war. Number 10. Pemmican. Imagine a food so powerful it could keep a traveler alive for months. Pemmican was that miracle. Made from dried buffalo meat, tallow, and berries, it packed more energy than modern protein bars. Plains tribes like the Cree and Blackfoot carried it through blizzards, wars, and hunts. Each batch began with sun-dried strips of bison, ground to powder, then mixed with melted fat and berries. It didn't rot, it didn't mold, it just waited, ready for famine or battle. In 1810, the Hudson's Bay Company bought thousands of pounds to feed fur traders during long expeditions. One historian called it the fuel of empire. However, when colonists realized its value, they took over production and banned native people from selling it. By 1870, factories were making cheap copies, cutting tribes out entirely. The same food that built their trade became a tool of control. Even so, it survived underground. Families still make it today for winter hunts and ceremonies. Modern tests show it can last over 20 years without spoiling. But one ingredient often used alongside it, a wild nut that tasted like butter, sparked another kind of story. Why did that ancient food vanish right when settlers discovered its secret oil? Number 9. Hickory milk. Hickory trees once covered the eastern woodlands, and their nuts were pure treasure. Tribes like the Cherokee and Shawnee turned them into milk, thick, rich, and smoky. They cracked the shells with stones, boiled everything together, and strained it through woven baskets. What poured out looked like cream and tasted like roasted caramel. That hickory milk wasn't dessert, it was survival fuel. It carried protein, minerals, and warmth through long winters. Early explorers who tried it were stunned. In 1709, John Lawson wrote, "The Indians make a sweet milk from their nuts, better than any I've tasted." By the 1800s, settlers copied the recipe, using it for cornbread, soups, and even baby food. Yet when dairy took over, hickory milk disappeared, written off as primitive. Now we buy almond and oat milk, while the original plant milk sits forgotten in the forest. Nutrient tests show hickory milk had more magnesium and healthy fats than cow's milk. A food that simple shouldn't have vanished, but progress often buries genius. And speaking of buried genius, the next recipe survived underground, literally. A plant that slept through drought and woke to feed whole tribes. But what happened when science rediscovered it in space labs centuries later? Number 8. Desert bean stew. Imagine trying to grow food where the ground cracks and the air burns at 110 degrees Fahrenheit. For centuries, the Tohono O'odham people did exactly that, and their secret was a humble legume called the tepary bean. It thrived in heat that killed every other crop. Its roots dove deep, its pods stayed tight, and when rain finally came, it exploded in green life. Spanish records from the 1600s describe fields that seem dead until the sky opens. That miracle wasn't luck, it was science. The tepary bean fixes nitrogen into the soil, restoring fertility year after year. Each bean carried over 25% protein, more than most modern crops. During famine, one pot of stew could feed a family for days. Yet by the early 1900s, teparies almost vanished, replaced by imported beans that couldn't survive desert life. Then, in the 1970s, a climate scientist named Gary Nobben rediscovered them during research on drought-resistant plants. He called them seeds that laugh at the sun. Today, NASA studies templates for potential space farming. But while one bean returned to fame, another ingredient of ancient America became fuel for ceremony, energy, and war. A single grain that fed empires and then was banned by them. What made it too powerful for the conquerors to allow? Number 7. Amaranth Porridge. It glittered like gold in the sun. Fields of amaranth once covered the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. Warriors ate it before battle, and mothers fed it to children after drought. It gave strength, calm, and courage. In 1521, when the Spanish invaded, they saw something deeper: people using food in ritual. Amaranth was mixed with honey and blood to honor gods of harvest and life. The Spaniards saw rebellion. They outlawed the crop, punished growers, and burned fields. By 1600, it nearly vanished. Yet the seeds survived. Hidden in clay jars, passed from mothers to daughters, grown in secret mountain plots. One handful could sprout thousands of plants. That defiance kept it alive. Modern science now calls amaranth a complete protein, containing all 9 essential amino acids, the kind of nutrition ancient armies already understood. By the 1980s, amaranth made a comeback as a health food, hailed as the grain of the future. Irony has a strange taste. Still, its story connects to another that began not in golden fields, but deep in oak forests. A food so bitter it had to be purified with patience, and so sacred it shaped entire winter rituals. What ancient process turned poison into bread? Number 6. Acorn Stew. When autumn came, tribes across California gathered beneath oak trees. Children filled baskets with acorns, laughing as they cracked shells beside elders. Every family stored hundreds of pounds. It looked like a simple harvest, but it carried a deeper meaning: endurance. Raw acorns could make you sick. Their tannins burned the tongue and stomach. So the people learned to leach them, soaking, grinding, and rinsing the meal for days until the bitterness was gone. What remained was smooth, nutty flour used for bread, porridge, and stew. Each step was a ritual. Water from clean streams, songs sung during grinding, patience through every rinse. It taught balance. Nothing in nature was useless, only misunderstood. By the time settlers arrived in the 1800s, tribes like the Miwok and Yokuts had hundreds of recipes built around that single ingredient. Modern nutrition tests show acorn meal is rich in potassium, iron, and fiber. What outsiders once mocked as poverty food may have been one of the most sustainable diets ever recorded. But as forests fed villages, the rivers gave something even greater: a living feast that became the center of trade, celebration, and prophecy. Yet when industry came, that sacred cycle collapsed. How did abundance turn to loss in a single century? Number 5. River Salmon Feast. For thousands of years, salmon shaped life in the Pacific Northwest. Every summer, rivers turned silver as fish fought upstream, and tribes gathered to thank the waters. The first salmon ceremony wasn't just a meal, it was a promise. Eat the first catch, return the bones to the river, and the salmon will always return. That cycle worked for centuries. Tribes like the Nez Perce, the Chinook, and the Tlingit relied on smoked, dried, and roasted salmon to survive harsh winters. In 1855, when treaties forced tribes onto reservations, the fish were already declining. By the 1900s, dams blocked entire runs. Millions of salmon vanished, and so did a way of life. Elders said the river grew quiet. By 1980, some runs dropped by 90%. Now, restoration projects try to undo what the industry erased. The salmon remains more than food. It's identity, spirit, memory. But while the rivers struggled, the deserts kept a different kind of feast alive. A tree that gave sweetness, flower, and survival in a single pod, all while restoring the land around it. Yet few know how its sugar rewrote the story of health and hunger. In the Southwest. Number 4. Mesquite Bread. Imagine a tree that feeds you, heals you, and fixes the soil under your feet. That's the mesquite. Its long golden pods once filled baskets across the Sonoran Desert. The Pima and Apache tribes ground them into flour so fine it felt like sand. Mesquite flour had a low sugar index, yet tasted like caramel and honey. A single pound carried as much protein as a steak. In 1860, travelers wrote about a desert bread that sweetens the mouth without sugar. Even the livestock ate it during droughts. Then came white flour, and mesquite disappeared. For nearly a century, it was treated as a weed. Ranchers even poisoned groves to make room for cattle. But modern nutrition flipped the story. Scientists found mesquite helps regulate blood sugar and heal degraded soil. A food once forgotten became medicine again. Desert tribes never stopped using it. Each harvest was a celebration, each meal a memory. And speaking of memory, another desert plant carried more stories than any other. It grew with spines, stored water, and healed the people who ate it raw. But when colonizers saw how much the tribes depended on it, they turned it into currency and punishment. How could one cactus hold both medicine and rebellion? Number 3. Nopales. If you walk through Sonoran heat, you'll see it everywhere, bright green paddles of cactus shimmering under the sun. Nopales. For centuries, tribes called it life itself. They grilled it, dried it, boiled it, and even used it as medicine. Spanish explorers in 1541 wrote that, "The Indians of the desert live well on this plant alone. Its flesh cooled fevers, sealed wounds, and steadied blood sugar long before Western medicine caught up. One serving delivered fiber, calcium, and vitamin C. everything the desert took away. By the 1800s, nopales became currency. Colonizers traded them, taxed them, and even burned them to punish villages during uprisings. Yet they always grew back. Nothing could kill them. Today, scientists call it a superfood. Mexican families still eat it daily, fried with eggs or mixed into salads. Its survival is made simple, generation after generation. But the story doesn't end in the desert. The next food came from the sea, dark, slippery, and full of power. It fed villages along the coast and cured diseases centuries before doctors understood iodine. So why did people stop eating the ocean's best medicine right when they needed it most? Number 2. Seaweed soup. For tribes along the Pacific coast, the sea wasn't a border, it was a pantry. Beneath every tide pool grew a medicine chest of kelp and bladderwrack, waving like brown silk in the surf. Harvesters cut it by moonlight, washed it in salt water, and laid it out to dry under the sun. Within hours, it turned from slick to crisp, ready for trade or stew. In the 1700s, Russian explorers noticed something strange. Coastal tribes had almost no cases of goiter or scurvy. They didn't know why. Centuries later, science explained it. Seaweed carried iodine, iron, and minerals that kept the thyroid strong and immune systems sharp. The Haida and Maka tribes boiled it into broth during long winters. One bowl could restore strength after weeks at sea. Later, during the gold rush, settlers traded gold dust for dried seaweed when supplies ran low. But when processed salt replaced natural minerals, people slowly forgot the ocean's pharmacy. By the 1900s, seaweed was labeled poor man's food. Now it's back in health stores at 10 times the price. And while the coast healed bodies, the mountains hid a different kind of nourishment, a seed so rich it fueled migrations, ceremonies, and wars. Yet its return in modern times sparked scientific arguments no one expected. Why did one tiny seed divide both culture and science? Number 1. Amaranth Cakes. Deep in the mountains of Mexico, families still grind tiny red seeds on stone matats. The rhythm hasn't changed in 500 years. That seed, amaranth, once fed empires. Aztec warriors carried cakes made from it during conquests, calling it the food of the gods. One handful held enough protein and minerals to survive for days. In 1521, when the Spanish invaded Tenochtitlan, they banned it. They saw the rituals, people shaping amaranth dough into figures during festivals, and called it heresy. They burned fields across the valley. By 1600, most of it had vanished from sight, but it never truly disappeared. Women hid the seeds in clay jars, planting them behind their homes, passing them quietly down generations. Centuries later, scientists in the 1970s tested those same seeds and found they contained more lysine and calcium than any modern grain. The UN even listed amaranth as a future food for global security. Today, it grows again in schools, gardens, and space research labs. It outperforms wheat in poor soil and dry climates. The same crop once erased by conquest may feed the world's future. And maybe that's the story that ties them all together. How survival itself became the most ancient recipe of all. Some secrets taste like memory. Click the next video on your screen right now before it disappears. It continues this story and reveals how ancient cooking shaped our modern survival.